Ecuador is one of the most diverse countries on Earth. It is made up of four very different regions. The coastal region along the Pacific Ocean, where most of the agricultural activity occurs. The Andes region, made up of high mountains, volcanoes, deep valleys, and cloud forests. The Amazon, with its dense rainforests and multitudinous rivers, and the best known, the Galapagos Islands, with their amazing abundance of plants and animals. The coastal region is over 1,243 miles in length and runs along the Pacific Ocean. It includes Ecuador's most populous city, Guayaquil, which is also its largest trading port. This region produces most of Ecuador's crops for export: cocoa, coffee, bananas, rice, fish, and cattle. Guayaquil is underrated by locals and tourists alike. Those Ecuadorians that visit here are generally on their way to the beaches further up the coast. Foreigners come here to board a plane to the Galapagos Islands. This city, however, has a lot to offer and is well worth a more lengthy visit. In January 2021, an urban cable car opened in Guayaquil. It features graceful gondolas that soar over the Gages River, providing transportation between Guayaquil and Duran, a neighboring city. A fun way to spend a day is by floating across the river in a gondola, eating lunch in Duran, and then returning to Guayaquil. For locals living across the river, the gondola provides the most direct way of reaching Guayaquil and avoiding the 45-minute trip each way on a crowded bridge that connects the two cities. Another captivating experience for tourists and locals alike is a 2.5-kilometer walkway along the Guayas River called El Malecón Simón Bolívar 2000. All along the path are interesting sights: a monument commemorating the Guayaquil Conference of two great South American liberators, Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín. There are small food stands and souvenir shops, a botanical garden, an amusement park with what is said to be the largest Ferris wheel in South America, and lovely views of the very wide and impressive Guayas River. A more difficult challenge for those who are brave and strong enough is to climb the 444 numbered steps to the neighborhood called Las Peñas. At the summit is a lighthouse that you can also climb if you still have enough energy. From there, you can see magnificent views of the city. If you are too tired, wonderful views are available at the top of the 444 steps as well. One of the most exciting sights in Guayaquil is the Parque Seminario. As a park goes, it is pretty small, a large city block. But the residents of the park come in all sizes. There are over 300 types of iguanas there, roaming freely, happily interacting with humans who might have a little food for them. Mostly they lie lazily around the premises, as intent on sunbathing as any bikini-clad human ever is. You need to walk carefully through this park, lest you step on one of the smaller ones. The mountain region runs parallel to the coastal region and slices the country down the middle. These mountains are high. 22 are over 13,800 feet. Between these high peaks are flatlands called basins, where the majority of human habitation exists and where most of the economic activity of this region occurs. Quito, the capital of Ecuador and the second largest city in the country, is on a basin at an elevation of 9,340 feet. making it the second highest capital city in the world after La Paz, Bolivia. Looming over the city on a hill called the Panaceo is a huge statue of the Virgin Mary, made of 7,400 pieces of aluminum that originated in Spain. It is 135 feet tall, the largest aluminum sculpture in the world. When you visit the Virgin on the hill that is 200 meters higher than the already high city, you get a panoramic view of Quito. The old city of Quito is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its well-preserved historical center. Having been ultra-religious, the Spanish built a great number of huge churches and cathedrals in the city, including the Iglesia de San Francisco, the Iglesia de la Compañía de Jesus, and the Basilica del Voto Nacional. All of these are huge edifices that are elaborately decorated inside with gold ornaments and exquisite stained glass windows. Iglesia de la Compañía de Jesus and the Basilica del Voto Nacional are Gothic, but the Iglesia de San Francisco is of Mudejar architecture, a combination of Jewish, Islamic, and Christian architecture that originated in Aragon, Spain. There are two exquisite museums in Quito that reflect the culture of Ecuador. The first is the Casa Museo Guayasamín. Oswaldo Guayasamín is probably the most famous and beloved artist in Ecuador. While attending college, Guayasamín's best friend died in a political demonstration. This was a traumatic event that resounded throughout Guayasamín's entire life. La Capella del Hombre, a separate building in the museum, displays works about the suffering of Latin American people. A second museum is in the artist's gracious home, where is housed his private collection. There are some contemporary works, some works by famous European painters, but much indigenous work. The setting for this museum is exquisite, with its 360-degree views of the mountains and volcanoes surrounding Quito. A second wonderful museum in Quito is very different from the Museo Guayasamín. La Casa del Alabado displays pre-colonial indigenous art. The museum is set in a 17th century house. The pieces are uniformly beautiful and well preserved, and the building in which the works are housed is elegant and palatial. Ecuador is named for its most famous geographical feature, the equator, which runs straight through the middle of the country. One of the many sights to see while in Quito is called Mitad del Mundo, the middle of the world, where the visitor can stand on the equator, although the true equator is actually 240 meters north of this designated line. But nevertheless, it is fun to have pictures taken on each side of the line. "Help," I wrote on Facebook. "My husband is in the southern hemisphere while I am in the northern." Quito also has a breathtaking gondola ride, Teleférico, that ascends the dormant Pichincha volcano. It is a 20-minute ride that takes you to a location 1.5 miles high. Here, the oxygen is thin and the air is cold. On a clear day, the landing site, Cruz Loma, provides extraordinary views of Quito. On a cloudy day, spectacular views of the other mountains and volcanoes in the region are visible. The area around Quito is blanketed with volcanoes. Cotopaxi is the world's highest active volcano and is a tourist attraction for those adventurers who wish to climb its side. Sangay is one of Earth's most active. In all, there are 22 volcanoes in Ecuador, of which 20 are active. East of the Andes is the largest region of Ecuador, the Amazon Basin. This rainforest extends into northern Peru and all the way to the eastern coast of Brazil. The forest itself is thick and impenetrable, but there are many rivers throughout that allow people to navigate from one place to another. Ecuador is one of the most biologically diverse countries in the world. Its rainforest is a gem whose very presence aids in lessening the effects of climate change by preserving the flora and fauna of the earth. Many environmentalists claim that Yasuni National Park, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, is the most diverse place on the earth. It is 3,782 square miles around, slightly smaller than the state of Delaware and the state of Rhode Island combined. Yasuni is bursting with living creatures. There are over 1 million insect species, more than in all of North America. There are 400 plant species, 1,300 species of trees, 43 kinds of vertebrae, 173 mammals, 250 kinds of fish, and almost 600 different kinds of birds. As for humans, there are some. The permanent residents are from the ancient Quechua and Huarani family. These indigenous people love their home. Unfortunately, 40% of Ecuador's oil reserves are under their beloved land. When the government intended to allow oil companies to build roads and wells in this park, the tribesmen demonstrated against it, as did many famous people throughout the world, such as Al Gore, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ed Norton, and some other TV and movie stars from the U.S. As a result, the government agreed to refrain from drilling if other countries and organizations would pay the government of Ecuador to keep the lands dormant. Although they reached this agreement, the president of Ecuador canceled it when the sources failed to raise adequate money. In 2016, oil exploration began, and with it, illegal logging and other environmentally destructive practices. The people of Ecuador, particularly members of the indigenous tribes, organized a successful national referendum in 2023. Yasuni became a protected territory again, but one that is very threatened by a number of factors besides oil exploitation: mining, deforestation, narco-trafficking, and political corruption, among others. Yasuni National Park has an area of 2.5 million acres, about 53,000 of which are the domain of the Quechua Anangu people. This group has developed two enterprises, the Napo Wildlife Center and the Napo Cultural Center. The Napo Wildlife Center is an ecotourism community named as one of the top 100 sustainable communities in the world. It introduces its guests to the wonders of the rainforest. It is remote. It is authentic. It is run by the true sons and daughters of the rainforest. For those travelers who want to explore this part of nature, it is a perfect place to visit. To get to the Napo Wildlife Center from Quito, you must travel to the small city of Coca on the confluence of the Coca and the Napo rivers. From there, you get into a motorized canoe for a 2-hour trip up the Napo River. The Quechua Arangu people do not allow motors in their land, so the second part of the 4-hour trip is in a non-motorized canoe paddled by a number of tribesmen. It is quite a glorious experience to move deeper and deeper into the jungle. With every stroke of the paddles, you migrate a little further into the deep recesses of the untouched earth. The only sounds you hear are the paddling of canoes, the cacophony of birds, the screech of monkeys, and the lapping of the waters as they flow against the banks. After this long trip, you arrive at the Napo Wildlife Center. The luxurious cabins in which you stay all have views of Orangu Lake. If you have come here for a long rest, you have come to the wrong place. Yes, you fall asleep to the sounds of nature, but you also have to get up in the dark, eat a hasty breakfast, and board the canoes for your various adventures. The animals in the rainforest do not wait for the late risers. You have come here to see them, so there is no time to waste. There is so much to do. You can ascend above the tree line by climbing the stairs in a 120-foot observation tower. Here you arrive at a phenomenal place to view birds flying above the canopy and animals that hide high in the limbs of trees. The native guides bring their special binoculars and other equipment to allow you to observe these animals. You can also canoe to the parrot clay lick. Clay counteracts the toxins from berries and other vegetation eaten by parrots, parakeets, and macaws. These birds show up from places many miles away to lick the clay and reduce their toxins. On a sunny day, the pits are as full as a rock concert. On rainy days, the hardy few show up, while the others are hiding out, waiting for the sun. There are many animals to see as you paddle around the lake and the river. Giant otters often make their appearance, bobbing up and down in the water, appearing to have a wonderful time with each other. And of course, there are caimans. You cannot swim in Orangu Lake because that might be your last swim ever if you look like a juicy and delicious tidbit for these creatures. They lazily make their way around the lake, scaring some of the fish and humans as they do so. The Wildlife Center supports their people with profits from the center. They run a cultural center in which there is a free health clinic, an elementary school, and a high school. People who live in the jungle can come here rather than making the long trek to the city of Coca. In this complex is a presentation center. On one side is a kitchen at which the native women cook local treats for tourists to taste. On the other side is a place for oral presentations and songs and dances. When we arrived at the presentation center, women were cooking a native dish, one they consider to be a delicacy, larva. They offered us a taste, but Barbara refused. Being a vegetarian saved her. But I ate one, and it was good. Our guide ate a live one while it was still wriggling. I said to myself, to each his own, but that is definitely not for me. Then the women danced for us and invited us to dance with them. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. After visiting the cultural center, strolling in the jungle, canoeing on the lake and the river, seeing insects, monkeys, animals, and birds galore, and getting a profound appreciation for rainforest life, it was time to leave. The trip back to civilization was a new adventure. The plane from the small airport at Coca leaves at an early hour. It is about 5 hours from the dock at the Napa Wildlife Center to the airport. We were up at around 4 o'clock to get into the canoe. It was dark, darker than it ever is around the cities, because there is absolutely no light pollution. The natives held a flashlight beam on the water to help them avoid any obstacles, but otherwise we rode in absolute blackness. You could hear the splashing of the paddles, see only the outlines of the guides paddling in the front of the canoe, and sometimes look into the vegetation on the sides of the river and see bright eyes staring back. Even the birds seemed to be asleep. It was so quiet. But each stroke brought us closer to civilization, further from the wonderful lodge and the lovely native culture that we had experienced in Napo. The fourth and best known region of Ecuador is the Galapagos Islands. Charles Darwin made his famous trip to the Galapagos in 1835 on his well-known ship called the Beagle. A geologist and naturalist, he had been exploring the coast of South America for 3 years and was on his return voyage to England. This 5-week stopover revolutionized his thinking and began to believe in natural selection and evolution. He published On the Origin of Species in 1859, having had 24 years to mull over everything he saw and experienced on the islands. The Galapagos are filled with a rich diversity of animal and plant life, partly because of their favorable position at a meeting point of 2 ocean currents. These waters carry nutrients, oxygen, and organisms that were picked up in their sweep across the ocean. The Galapagos are so remote from other islands and divided from each other that invasive species seldom arrive here on their own. The closest mainland point is Ecuador, some 500 nautical miles away. There are giant tortoises on most of the islands. Human beings, especially during the age of exploration, found them to be a good source of meat and devoured them in quantity, causing their population to drop precipitously. In addition, human inhabitants migrating to the islands introduced goats, dogs, cats, and rats that preyed on the tortoise eggs and hatchlings. Soon tortoises became extinct on at least one island. The government has introduced a number of breeding locations for giant tortoises. On San Cristobal Island, La Galapaguera de Coro, Colorado, runs a dating service for male and female tortoises, protects the eggs and hatchlings from predators, and ensures that the young live a long and healthy life. The visitor to this site can follow the evolution of the tortoises from small eggs to huge adults. We even were able to catch sight of a few intimate moments between the amorous tortoises. Lonesome George, a world-famous tortoise, was the last of his particular breed and died at an estimated 100 years old on June 24, 2012. It was thought that tortoises endemic to Pinto Island were extinct when Lonesome George was discovered wandering about one day. Naturalists did everything they could to find a sweetheart for George, but no other pinto tortoises were discovered, and George took no interest in subspecies. George never had any offspring, much to the disappointment of the naturalists. In the Darwin Center on Santa Cruz Island is a statue in George's honor. Many of the inhabitants, both plants and animals, on the Galapagos are endemic. That is, they are limited to the area and do not exist outside of it. Many are not only endemic to the Galapagos, but endemic to the one island on which they reside. Should one of these become extinct, they are simply gone from the earth. For example, the Galapagos penguin, the flightless cormorant, and the marine iguana are all endemic and all endangered. When we arrived by plane at the airport on San Cristobal Island, we were transported to a dock and greeted by a large group of sea lions sitting on all the seats that were constructed for human passengers to use while waiting for the incoming ferries. The sea lions were remarkably comfortable and found that the presence of humans was no reason for them to disturb their siesta. After all, they are the princes and princesses of the Galapagos and are well aware of their high status. From time to time, one would roll over, open his eyes, and say to himself, "I'm not hungry yet. I think I'll rest a bit longer." They live everywhere on just about all the islands, and when not sleeping, can be seen playing in the water. No matter how you visit the islands, by staying in the small towns or on a boat that transports you from island to island, your activities remain much the same as were Charles Darwin's in the 19th century. The point of visiting the Galapagos is to explore the islands and to see with your own eyes as much of the wildlife as you can in the time that you spend there. One of the most populous endemic animals is the marine iguana. Darwin described them as hideous-looking creatures of a dirt-black color, stupid and sluggish in their movement. But he noted that they swam with perfect ease and swiftness. They may be ugly, but they are not dangerous to humans and could easily win gold in the Summer Olympics. The land iguana, as opposed to the marine iguana, is commonly found crawling across the drier areas. They also are quite ugly, but not at all dangerous. The islands are home to one of the smallest penguins on Earth, and the only type of penguin to reside north of the equator. There are only about 1,300 pairs left because their nesting places have been taken over by the marine iguanas. Famous among the birds of the Galapagos is the Darwin finch. There are 13 different species of this bird on different islands, and by studying their differences, Darwin got an inkling of biological changes that occur in response to environmental differences. The blue-footed booby is not endemic to the islands, although 1/2 of its total population breeds here. Others live along the coasts from California to Peru, but about 70% of them live in the Galapagos. Eventually, the traveler must say goodbye to these exquisite islands and explore the other parts of Ecuador. And after having done that, it is time to leave this awe-inspiring country and return home. Most travelers are astonished by the very different landscapes that they have encountered. Most wish to return to further explore the never-ending beauty here.